Okay, so we'll start off with some basic shapes for the diminished seventh chord. Some pretty familiar grips, I would think. This is the first one. Here's the second one. And the third. It's worth pointing out that the first one and the third one are actually very similar. All that's really happened between here and here is that the note that was up on the top E string has gone down on the bottom. Now, I would imagine most of you have played those shapes before, and you may also be aware that because it's a symmetrical chord, they can be moved in 3 fret jumps, that's a minor third interval, and they'll still be the same thing. So E diminished here can come up 3 frets and still be an E diminished. Now, I'm calling it E diminished, but I could just as easily have said B flat diminished or D flat diminished or G diminished, because those are all the same notes. And this is what we mean by symmetry. So there's a really easy way on the guitar to get a sense of what's meant by a symmetrical chord. And that is to look at what those chord tones are if they're played along one string. And there's a reason that I chose the key that I chose just then, because that chord had an E in it, which means that we can use the low E, the open E string, doesn't matter which one, and you can map out the structure of the chord by simply playing minor third intervals, 3 fret jumps up the E string. So E, and then jumping 3 frets, you get to G, another 3 frets, B flat, another 3 frets, D flat, and another 3 frets finally, you're back to E again. So those are the notes of the E diminished seventh chord, but as you can see, the distance between each voice of the chord was exactly the same. And that's what's meant by symmetry. It means that any one of those notes can be the root, and it also means that when you invert the chord, you keep getting the same thing over and over again. So what that means is E diminished seventh, G diminished seventh, B flat diminished seventh, and D flat diminished seventh are all basically the same chord. And there's another interesting property of that, because it means that the diminished seventh chord is what we call a chord of limited transposition. And the reason is, obviously we could do the same thing a half step higher. We could play from an F and go up in minor third leaps, and we would produce another diminished seventh chord, which can be one of 4 different things depending on what we consider to be the root. And we could do the same again a half step higher from F sharp, like so. But then if we went a half step again, you would hit G, and all that would happen is you would replicate the 4 notes that we started with, which, as we've already discussed, is the same thing as E diminished, G diminished, they're all the same chord. And then if we went past the G, we would just be replicating the F, and so on and so forth. So what that means is there are only 3 diminished seventh chords that can be made with the 12 notes of the chromatic scale. And that's useful information for later on, because what it means is that when we're playing a song, if that song is in a key, any one of the 12 possible diminished seventh chords that might occur can only really relate to the overall key centre in one of 3 ways. So part of this lesson is about categorising diminished seventh chords into those 3 groups. So you can always see how far removed you are from the tonality of the piece that you're playing.